So I will now turn this over to you, Terry, and I believe Terry will be sharing his screen with us. You should have all have received the PowerPoint ahead of time. We will also be sending out kind of an updated version after we have the call today and the call on Wednesday with any other documents that are requested to be shared as well.
Yeah, and first of all, I'm humbled and honored to be speaking today because many of you have great experiences with strategic planning, maybe not specifically in schools, but it's certainly like you have a wealth of information about strategic planning. So this is really an interactive presentation. So at any time, if you want to stop and ask questions, a lot of this information I got working with PLC Associates, who's stationed here in New York and Florida. And they come in and they do strategic planning for multiple districts, schools that are in trouble, a wide variety of schools, including Our Lady of Mercy School for Young Women in Rochester. The first strategic plan we did with PLC Associates. So I'm going to attribute a lot of this information to them, and also want to thank Our Lady of Mercy School for Young Women, where I was principal for 10 years, because I had the ability to work with them on 2 strategic plans, and I think we're quite successful for a lot of the things that I'm going to go over. I think my draft of the strategic plan may have been sent out, but this is a final version or semi-final version. So whatever you got in the first place, if you follow with me through this, I'm going to share my screen with you, and we're going to go through today what we want to talk about. So we've been through part of this, but I really want to land on this point here, and that is if you have, and many of you do have a strategic plan or familiar with a strategic plan, I want you to think about these questions before we get into the specifics about strategic planning. If you have a strategic plan, is it timely? I heard from a couple of you it needs to be renewed, it needs to be regenerated. Is it meeting the needs that your school has right now? When does it expire? Most boards will put together a strategic plan for probably no more than 5 years. 3 to 5 years is the reasonable amount. Anything longer than that, it really runs out of viability. So one of the things I learned from working with PLC Associates is you need to have measurable objectives and strategic intents. Some people call them SMART goals. 90% of the faculty will be involved in training on a particular topic by the year X numbers XYZ. And it could be multiple years that your objectives go out on. But you need to have measurable objectives at the end of each year. You can take a look at and say, oh, we didn't quite get to that one, or we exceeded that goal. We exceeded that strategic intent. And those are important to look at them to see if your objectives are measurable. And is it focusing on your current work, what's important to you right now? And it can be a wide variety in schools. Schools, especially Mercy schools, have a variety of things that they need to take a look at. Not all are educational, not all are instructional. Sometimes it's facilities, sometimes it's finance, sometimes it's recruitment. Whatever that might be, you should have objectives and measurable objectives that you can look at the end of each year and say, we got to that, we didn't get to this one, we need to work on this. And so who's responsible for it in your implementation plan? So if each objective has somebody that's responsible for, it's more meaningful, it happens, you hold people accountable for what they're trying to do, and you really can get to a point where each year, each action item can be distinguished and then can be part of your plan for the year 1, year 2, year 3. If you say no to a lot of these things up above, you really need to think about what is it that you need to do in order to get a strategic plan. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's something that you really need to take a look at. I know on our first strategic plan, when we were working with a company, they said it's going to take 1.5 years to put this strategic plan together. And I turned to him and I said, no, we need to do it in like 4 months. And somehow we got it in about 6 months. We had our strategic plan from start to finish. So you really have to take a look at this. If it's going to be meaningful, if it's going to get everybody involved, it needs to be put together with the whole community. And that's where I'm going to get to next. So you're an educator, you're a board member, and you have to be involved collaboratively, participate in the following things. Creating a vision based on the mission and beliefs of the school. Now, you may already have that. And if you're going into a new strategic plan, I think at least cursory, you need to take a look at your mission statement and your beliefs. And are those current mission statement and the beliefs of your school still relevant? Are they still part of what we should be focusing on? Is that part of your vision? I know in our first one, we did not revise our mission statement. In the second one, we did, and we took the time to do it. And I think you need to seriously have the committee or whoever putting this together look at your vision and mission. You need to analyze the needs of the ministry and select areas of focus. Not every area is part of strategic planning. Some things don't need to be touched. Maybe your facilities are in great shape and you spend a lot of time on them, and now you're just maintaining those facilities. Don't put it as part of your strategic plan. If your endowment is an issue and you want to raise money, set some goals and put together in your strategic plan an action plan to achieve those goals on endowment and or fundraising or scholarships that you need. So focusing on the particular areas is going to create a better strategic plan, and it's going to meet the needs of your school currently where you're at. So you need to assist as a board member or a leader in your school in the development of the action items which are part of the strategic plan. And I'm going to go over the specifics of a strategic plan with you, what I think are important elements of a strategic plan. So at this point in time, you need to be able to review your progress annually, and you need to celebrate your successes. And that's a big, important piece. At the end of each year, at the beginning of setting goals for your board or for your school, you need to celebrate when you reach those milestones. So let's start with talking about what a strategic plan is and what it probably isn't.
Terry, can I stop you just for 1 second?
Sure.
Just a quick question. For the strategic plan itself, who's the driver of it? Is it administration? Is it the board? Who's all on that committee? Or, who?
In our situations, the board should be the driver of the strategic plan. So, but it has to involve like a core team, which we call a core team. A core team considers people from the outside of your organization. It includes parents, teachers, students, board members, administrators. All should be part of developing that strategic plan. But usually the board sets and approves the strategic plan. And so therefore, just to put it together, a strategic plan, it shouldn't be just the administrators in the building making a plan for what we should be addressing. Those are school goals and other things. A strategic plan for a Mercy ministry should include all the aspects that needed to be addressed at the time of the strategic plan. And it might be, I know at the last one for Our Lady of Mercy, we took a look at finance, we took a look at recruitment, we took a look at the academic program, and I think, one of the things we did with ours was put together a piece for seniors to take a look at. So they need to be set up and then approved by this core team, which is representing the board, so that your areas of focus are selected. And so the board approves it, the board manages it, the board should be the people who are driving the strategic plan.
Thank you.
So the strategic plan should involve the entire community. And that's how you get people excited about what your goals are going to be. So when you start to set up a strategic plan, you need to take a look at that mission statement with a core of people, including business people from your community, parents from your community, board members, administrators, students, faculty, college representation. Are we setting the goals for this school with this community so that they can then support your goals once you get to that action plan at the end of the strategic planning? So it becomes your framework for where you want to be, your desired state in 3 years or 5 years. If it's to be fiscally sound and solvent, then your goal is to how do we get there over the next 3 years? If it's to increase enrollment, what is your goal to increase enrollment? If it's to monitor and improve your curriculum, how are you going to do that? What's the desired state? Do you want to have curriculum maps for all of your courses in 3 years? Would be an example. And then it creates a high-performing culture and the ability to achieve specific outcomes, measurable outcomes. A good strategic plan has to be able to be measured. It can't be just philosophy. We want to have more money. We want to do this. We want to do that. We want to have a good curriculum. It has to be measurable. How are you going to get there? So a lot of this terminology I have picked up from PLC Associates and as far as strategic planning goes. So these are good components of a strategic plan. You, and I don't know if my screen is showing exactly the way it is with our pictures on it, or just is it just showing the PowerPoint?
On my, depending on how each screen is set up, like on mine, okay. I can see our participants plus the PowerPoint. I mean, okay. I can see 9 participants, so it just depends on how each person has theirs. But everybody should be able to see the PowerPoint.
All right, beautiful. So these are the components I'm going to speak about in the next 40 minutes or so, and talk about the setting these things up. So the first 3 and actually the first 4 are set up by the core team. You have a group of people that are getting together to create the strategic plan. They need to take a look at your vision and mission, your belief statements for what the school is, and set up parameters about how you're going to operate. And usually the core team, once they get these established, they set up teams to take a look at each of those areas. So that's why it's important to keep it simple and to focus on 3 or 4 things that you need to improve on over the next 3 to 5 years. Then each of those teams would get specific about what is their intent, what do they want to accomplish, and then the rest of them will follow, the key initiatives, your action plan, and your final overall, what does the site-based plan look like. So participation of outside members, I can't emphasize enough. If you're going to be a school that thrives, a ministry that thrives, do the people out in the public, besides your parents, know what you believe in, know what your mission is, know what you want to work on, know what your desired state will be in 3 to 5 years? If the outside community and the colleges and people who are there to support you, businesses, are participating in this overall review in the beginning, they will get around and support your strategic plan when you're finished. So this is simple. I think we all have these. We should have these. You should have a vision for your school. You should have a mission statement, which is current. And if it isn't, then you need to revise and create and get that approved by your board. The belief statements. What do you believe in as a school, as a ministry, and what are your values? What are your values? Students must come first is a value. Do you believe that? Do you support that? Risk-taking is necessary for growth. Do you believe and support that? Do you believe and support that in your day-to-day actions in your school? If not, how would you go about creating that risk-taking as a necessary growth? It may be attributed directly to how you grade kids, how you put together your education plan, if that's what you believe in, that should be supported in your strategic plan. So these are just examples of vision, mission, and belief statement. I'm going to pause because I'm going pretty fast, and I want to see if there were any questions out there. Either they've all fallen asleep or they're still with me. I hope they're still with me.
Terry, it's Pam.
Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. I have a question on the mission statement because I was on the board and I saw all that Sister Pat B went through. Do you find that when you start a new strategic plan in less than a 5-year period, that something like your beliefs or your mission change drastically in light of the fact that we're all schools under the Sisters of Mercy? That confused me a little bit. So could you help me out with that?
Yeah, I think that if you've reviewed in the last 5 years and you had participation from the different groups, and I know Sister Pat did, that she had people participating from a wide variety of levels and students actively participated in designing that. I think what you need to do is to read it, believe in it, support it, and then if you're in the beginning of this process, is that still current and relevant to what we're doing? And if it is, just endorse it again. You don't have to necessarily recreate your mission statement. Your visions and belief statements should be the core of who you are as a school, and those can be revised or looked at and supported. Maybe there'll be some new ones that you want to encourage and have them in part of your plan. But no, I don't think you necessarily have to, but you have to re-endorse your mission statement.
Thank you.
Okay, Pam?
And just as a reminder, since you're talking about mission statements, in this process, if you do determine you want to change your mission statement, not only does your local board have to approve that, but the MESA board must also approve it. So you need to keep that in mind in your cycle of planning.
Mm-hmm. Yep, thanks.
MESA board does not approve vision statements or belief statements, only the mission.
Right. Good. All right. So this should be set. The parameters should be set up by the core team, the general group that's starting the process. So, and that's how the core team should work, and that's how your task forces should work, and that's how everybody who is working on the strategic plan should agree to do. So here are just some examples of what you might have as reference points directing the work of the people who are working on the strategic plan. All of the work will conform with stated mission and beliefs of Mercy. So if you're having conversations and they're not supporting, and you want to do some changes and they're not supporting your mission and beliefs, then you need to say, should we be spending time on it? Is this important? We will not add, eliminate, or revise any programs or services without careful, detailed analysis. Many people that go into strategic plans, including staff members and students, worry that they're going to lose a program, worry that they're going to, this new strategic plan is going to change their school dramatically from where they believe it should be. So you need to make sure that they're assured as working on this plan that they will be carefully analyzed before any eliminations, additions, or revisions are made. And I know this it's a very touchy subject because you have a lot of different stakeholders involved in the strategic plan. If you can assure them that these programs will not be eliminated without careful and detailed analysis, it'll go a long way on creating good task forces. Decisions may not exceed one levels of authority. That's always fun when you're in a task force and they want to, add a new cafeteria, but you don't have the finances for that, and it would be great for the strategic plan and morale and students and everything else, but that's beyond their authority to make that decision. Will not allow negativity and lack of support to block progress. So if you're in a task force or you're in a meeting and there's a lot of negative talk and lack of support, I think you need to be able to be specific about how you interact within your group. so that it is productive. Your meetings are productive, they're not negative. Certainly different ideas can be supported, but done in a positive way. And don't take on too many initiatives. The committees have work to do. They have specific action plans. They have to set up measurable objectives. And in order to do that, you can't take on too many initiatives in a strategic plan. So, key initiatives. Once the core team meets and decides there's 3 or 4 areas that need to be addressed in our next strategic plan, then that becomes a key initiative. So the key initiative might be wanting to increase enrollment by 10% over the next 3 years. That's a key initiative. We will design and implement a system of staff development and evaluate supervision to improve effectiveness and to recognize achievement. We will create a communication network. These are initiatives that become part of your focus for your strategic plan. And key initiatives then need to be measured. So, for example, if your key initiative is to increase enrollment by 10-15% over the next 3 years, then you have to design and implement it. That's a nice objective to have because it's measurable. So if it's to revise your curriculum and create maps for your curriculum so that everybody who comes into as a new teacher in your ministry knows exactly what they have to teach, that can't be done overnight. That would have to be a multiple year plan, and you would set that as your key initiative, overall objective, and then each year you would have an objective within that.
Hey, Terry, question?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's
Yeah.
Paul from Laurelton Hall. This section brings up the point where I've been, what's strategic for the board and what's operations for the, head of school and her or his staff. Do you start to differentiate that at this point of the discussion process around key initiatives, or does that come later, or how have you dealt with that issue?
Once the key initiatives are decided, Paul, then a task force is created to take a look at that. If it's curriculum related, the majority of the participants will probably be administrators and teachers, but it still should have a board member on there. It still should have some students on there, so that it's not just the administrators and teachers that are endorsing that or making that up, that it is a plan that can be endorsed by the whole community. So, and specifically, if it's educational and you have some college educators on your core team, invite them to be part of that curriculum piece. So the task force is really created once you decide what your key initiatives are. I'm going to get to that in a minute, and I hope that answered your question. Oh.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. So now, and I should have put in a slide there about task force, but task force are created by the core team or the general overall group. Each one has a key initiative to target, and those should be reflective of the people who are part of that decision making. If your task force, for example, is you want to increase your endowment and gift giving, then obviously the core part of your team should be the people who are responsible for that within your organization. But it also should include outside people, and should include staff members, administrators onto that group, so that you're having a group that is aware of what their action plan will be. And don't make it so many people that everybody who's involved in this is part of developing this plan, because you'll not be productive. I know when we did one and we had 22 members on a task force addressing part of an action plan. One, getting 22 people together is not possible. And then each meeting starts out with a review of the last meeting, and you really have you're really going to have a problem moving forward on any of your action plans. So you can create subgroups within a task force to look at a particular issue. And I'll show you how that happens here when you get to the action items. But if you create an action item, it should have an end result. It should be measurable, observable. It should be able to be implemented within a year or 1 year of or 2 or 3 years of your plan. So you should be able to measure it annually. So if there's 3 years you want to get to your curriculum maps, go back to that. In the first year, you want to have 30% of your maps created. So you might go by department. You might give some release time by department. You might work within the areas that you think really need to be addressed first within that. And then you need to be able to achieve those key initiatives. And that's the strength of your strategic plan, is that once you set up your key initiatives, that every action item supports getting to that key initiative. And then assign persons and groups for monitoring that. So if you had a curriculum director, that person would be in charge of the map. If you had a CFO, that person in the administrative wing would be in charge of taking a look at generating revenue. So make sure that someone in the group is assigned to monitor that. And I'll show you some specifics at the end of this piece. So go back to how this all works. We have a core team that is involved with a variety of different constituent groups. You have somebody who is leading that core team. Sometimes that's an outside facilitator. Sometimes that's an internal person. But an outside facilitator can be impartial and can think at that 10,000-foot level. So if you're looking at bringing someone in, when you're interviewing them, make sure that they are able to see the big picture and be able to manage different people and be able to manage a meeting, because you're asking 30 people maybe on a core team to be there. That hour and a half should be run smoothly and efficiently and task-oriented. Because the worst thing that can happen to a strategic plan is you come to a meeting and an hour and a half, very little gets accomplished. You come back to another meeting, an hour and a half, the same thing happens. So you make sure that you have a project leader that can run a meeting, that has be able to work with different groups of the community and be able to put forward strong movement in completing the strategic plan. They review mission, vision, and belief. They select the criteria that's facing mercy. And Paul, this is where the board gets involved. The board has to make sure that the areas that everybody's spending on the strategic plan are critical to the success of the school. And if it's not, then you shouldn't be spending time on it. And so, for example, if you're competing with other ministries around you, schools around you that have great facilities, and your facilities are lacking, and you know that as a board, that should be part of your strategic plan, addressing those facilities. If it has to do with, you believe in what you're hearing from the community is that your curriculum needs, your SAT scores, ACT scores are lower than what we would want to send our son or daughter to, then maybe you need to look at how do we improve the academic program. That would be one of your issues. So it's different for each school, but it has to be supported and endorsed by the board. So board participation in the core team is important. I would think you'd have 3 or 4 members from the board on there, including the board chair, to make sure that the work that's being selected is the things that the board feels that needs to be implemented to be a successful ministry. So then you establish your goals and you assign a task force to each goal. Some people call them goals, some people call them strategic intent, some people call them objectives. But if in the format that I'm showing you, it's a strategic intent and it's measurable. And it's measurable over 3 to 5 years of how you're going to be successful implementing that issue that's facing you that's so important. Then you're going to assign a specific task force, and each task force will have a project leader. Each task force will have groups of people from different areas of your school. The worst thing you could do is say, okay, I'm going to set up the same people that are working on the fundraising. You're going to be your task force. Come back and report back to us how you're going to improve. If you don't have outside people with a fresh look at it, if you don't have people from all the different areas looking at what you're trying to accomplish, you're going to be narrowed as far as your what we're going to be able to address, because it's just the people that have been working on that for that period of time. So that's why I say, if it's an educational piece, get some people from higher ed, get some people from that are involved in teaching in other areas. They could be parents, they could be college professors, they could be people who you know in the community that have strong educational background that would be supportive of creating objectives, goals, strategic intents for your strategic plan. And you need to monitor each strategic intent. And I'm going to show you that over the next few slides. And I'm just checking how I'm doing on time. We're in pretty good shape here. So it starts with your task force. Here's what's important about your task force. They have been given a goal, an objective, a strategic intent to address. They select a facilitator and solicit appropriate membership, as I said. Then they complete a SWOT analysis. In this area, what are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What are our oppositions and threats? What does those stand for? I forgot.
Opportunities.
Opportunities and threats. Thank you. So when you do this, everything becomes apparent. You know, everybody's working on this SWOT analysis, and hopefully it will expose the areas that you need to work on. So, and each SWOT analysis on the strategic intent should be done before you set up your key initiatives, your objectives for that particular goal. So that's a critical piece. Doing an analysis of what is currently out there. What is for example, if you're taking a look at enrollment and you have 4 high schools in the area that are competing for the same students, what do we have that they don't have? What do we need to get so that we can compete with those schools? So completing a SWOT analysis is a key portion. You can see how this is going to take time. You start with your core team. You start with the group that's going to collect and create these goals, strategic intents. Then each intent has to be assigned to a task force, which reports back to your core team. And the core team reports back to the board. So all of this has to be, in the end, supported by that original team, and that becomes your strategic plan. So once you identify your key initiatives that are going to address that goal, objective, they're going to address that goal, however you want to name it, then that each of those objectives could be multiple key initiatives to reach that one goal. For example, if you're into curriculum, you might want the curriculum to have maybe one portion of that goal. You may also want to take a look at the courses that you're offering. You may have another group that's going to take a look at these courses that we're offering still important for our graduates. And if not, what should we be offering instead? An example is you might not have enough engineering courses, and you really need to offer more engineering courses for students to be able to apply the math that they're learning in the classroom. Then you can create subgroups to address each one of those, and they're going to do a cost-benefit analysis. Is the cost of creating a CAD room for drawing going to benefit us in the long run? For the number of students that are going to be taking that, is there other ways that we can address that if that's a need that we have identified? So you have to take a look at, is the cost of a new turf field and track going to get more students to our school? It might, but a turf field and track is probably $2 million. And is it the best use of that funds? Could be using them for other things in order to attract students or create a better program. And then they will submit their final work back, the task force will, back to the core team. And that may take a couple of times to come back and forth to take a look at making sure that what you're submitting as your work is doable over the 3 to 5 year period, and what is it going to be as far as meeting the goals of your school, the things that the core team set out, the strategic intents for the core team over that time period. So I'm going to give you a couple of specific, take a look at this. This is what a final report might look like. Okay. Let me go up one. So the strategic intent might be that for staff development, maybe that's something that has been lacking in your ministry, and you really need to get your teachers up and doing some of the new and creative things that they could learn through a staff development program. So your goal might be by 2021, 22, 95%, there's the measurable portion of that, of the faculty and staff will indicate they benefited from a comprehensive, on-target staff development program. There's your goal. I hope you reach it. And I hope you reach it over those X number of years. But your key initiatives may have a few things in there that you need to then create, which becomes your action items in order to reach that strategic intent. So here it could be a key initiative that would come out of your strategic intent. The strategic intent's a goal. Here's an objective. We will develop and implement staff development programs to enhance knowledge, skills, and competency for the staff necessary to achieve our strategic intents, and so on, and meet a broad continuum of students' needs and learning styles. So the goal is have the faculty and staff have a better staff development program that creates, and then one of the initiatives would be then to take a look at your staff development program to make sure it's on target, creating an environment that meets students' needs and learning styles. So this might be an action item that came out of that strategic intent. In year one, we want to hire a grant writer to increase financial resources to support instructional initiatives, programming, and staff development. So here's the strategic intent one, which is staff development. Here's 1.1 is the action item under this idea. And then it's going to, estimated cost is $2,000. Who's responsible for it? The president. Okay? That's where the person who we can measure it, and we can see if at the end of that year whether or not we had hired a grant writer, or maybe we had decided that that's not where we want to go. Mesa is going to be offering a grant writing program, and we're going to take advantage of that. So just an example of where you might go with that. So here's your cost benefit analysis. And then you're going to put $1,500 to enhancing instructional leadership of principals and other administrators focusing on effective teaching. And that person, the curriculum coordinator of your building, is going to be responsible for creating that program and working with the leaders and administrators in your building on effective teaching. And there could be multiple action items that create that plan. These are just examples of two. So once again, you've got an action plan that goes in and meets this key initiative and strategic intent number one, which is staff development, which was created by this task force that gave their information to the core team, which has been approved at the end of your process. So all of these things are part of your strategic plan. There are so many different variations of strategic plan. I'm giving you one example here, but there's some core things that I think you need to make sure that you have. One is buy-in participation from all constituent groups. Two, you need to make sure it meets the mission, vision, and beliefs of what your school is all about. Three, it targets the areas critical to your success. Not every single piece, but critical to your success. And that you have an action plan that is measurable and meets those objectives over the period of time. So a good strategic plan will move your school forward annually in creating and meeting those goals that you have set aside and set up for your school. So, any questions up to this point? First of all, I want to thank Mesa, Our Lady of Mercy School for Young Women in Rochester, where I spent my 10.5 years enjoying the Girls of Mercy, and PLC Associates, which much of this information came from. So I'm just going to open it up to any questions that you might have.
Terry, can you talk a little bit about the strategic plan kind of being a living document of, let's say we've created our plan and then, we're in the middle of toward the end of year one and something surfaces. Can you add it to your strategic plan, or do you have to wait till your strategic plan is done? What's the...
Well, you can't change the strategic intent. Your strategic intent may still be staff development, but your action items can change because you've discovered things that aren't working or are working, but the action items, but it should not exchange your strategic intent, your goals and objectives, and your timeline, because then you really don't have a strategic plan. But if you get to the action items and you realize it's going to take more than 1 year to hire a grant writer, which is the objective there, then you can extend that timeline. But you really don't want to touch your strategic intents or your goals or your objectives because those are what you all agreed upon. Those were what the board endorsed. Those are the things that you want to focus and you want to measure on. So getting to those may change during the plan, but it doesn't change your overall strategic plan. Does that make sense? Other questions?
Terry, this is Bill O'Shea from Mary Mercy.
Yeah.
You mentioned the importance at the core team level, the involvement of the board. You mentioned 3 or 4 board members. In your experience, who else would you have on the core team? What other groups would be part of that core team?
Yeah, I think you need alum. So you need to take a look at your alumni and people who are in business and people who are in education. If they're an alum, will also help along that way. So I think you need community members, you need business people, you need students, you need parents, you need recent graduates and other people who know the school and want to support and endorse that. Because when you roll this plan out, those people are going to be able to speak to that in the community. And those people know what your needs are. And those connections that you've made with those people on the core team, Bill, will go far beyond what you can think of as supporting your mission and what you're trying to do.
Now, how large how large can a core team be and still be effective?
I think if you get more than 25, it's gonna be hard. So I would say 20 to 25, because this is your key group. You're gonna have all the constituents represented, and you want them to be able to. What happens from that group, Bill, is you spawn off these task forces, and somebody from the core team is going to be the facilitator for all those tasks. So each task that you create, you should have a immediate connection to your core team. So, for example, the principal may be on the core team, and the principal may be the person who is the facilitator, or assign a person who's a facilitator for that academic issue that you're dealing with.
Thank you.
Yep.
Terry,
Yeah.
this is Patty from Mount St. Mary in Little Rock. On establishing a core team, who is responsible for gathering these team members up?
Well, somebody's going to be assigned the responsibility of creating the strategic plan. It could be the president, it could be the board chair, it could be the principal, but I really think it should be either the president or someone on the board should be responsible for creating that strategic plan. Normally, it would fall, I think, in the president's purview, but that person would then begin that process.
I understand heading the strategic plan, but who is responsible for gathering up the core team members? To decide, oh, I want this person mean, would that just be a sole president's job or a chair? Or?
Yeah, it's your whoever your facilitator is. Now,
Mm-hmm.
you could hire an outside consultant to be the facilitator. You could
Right.
assign someone. The president could assign someone to be the facilitator of the core team. Hopefully, they have some experience with strategic planning. So
Mm-hmm.
you need somebody who understands the strategic plan. Some schools will hire an outside consultant to be the facilitator that would go into the principal and to the president and to the board chair to say, who should we invite to this to be part of this core team? And you would know those people. You would send out the invitation. The core team would send the invitation to, we would like to invite you into part of the process of creating our next strategic plan for the future of Mercy.
Well, I just came in on it. Excuse me, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Patty, finish.
Okay. I just came in on the tail end of a strategic planning process here, and it's a little difficult to walk in at the tail end of
Oh, sure.
but they had established not a core team, but a committee off of the board, a strategic planning committee, which I see is rather small in comparison to what you're talking about, a core team looking like. So maybe this is something that we do for the future, but I don't know how to back out of what's been going on, unless you have some suggestions that I add. I mean, really, they're almost at the approval stage.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're well through the plan. What you might want to get people involved in, Patty, is having them become part of the action plan. So if you know you have specific goals that you're coming out of, then solicit those people, since you've already been through the process. Solicit those people in the community, on your board, parents who will be very instrumental in helping that action plan work. So I would say at this point, maybe just invite those people.
Thank you.
Yep.
Terry, it's Pam again. So to just
Yeah.
go back, I'm trying to get down a lot of notes. You talked about the strategic plan and who runs it earlier, and you said the Board of Trustees is the driver, the president of the Board of Trustees, correct? Not me, the president?
The board approves and approves the strategic plan. So the board chair could say, you, President Pam, I would like you to be the facilitator, or you would work together with the board to say, here's what we'd like to do. We'd like to interview some people. We'd like to hire this facilitator. And that facilitator is going to work directly with the board president and the president of the school to create the core team to begin the initial summit.
Jointly then, I that's what I want. So
Yes.
We've already done step one. Caroline is actually driving that piece. Then the next piece is once we get a facilitator, then Caroline and I would work together with that person.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
You're going to you both will be intimately involved with the facilitator, because that person, whoever it is going to need help generating the names, getting the people together, setting up the meeting dates with you, and how often they're going to meet, what they're going to focus on.
And then one other, Terry, this could be you, and plus, I'm sorry, I didn't write his name down, the young man from Philadelphia. We are also, Marty's sitting here with me, in the middle of the Middle States process.
Yes.
And we had a call with our strategic planning group this morning. And my feeling was not to rush strategic plan until Middle States was done. And I think that's what I heard, that's the best thing to do, is if you're in the middle of Middle States, let that play out and then do strategic planning. Or what was your opinion on that?
Well, your strategic intents should be your Middle States report. Because if you have strategic intents that you're addressing, then your Middle States is going to ask you for what your goals are for the school. And they are your strategic intents. It could be from the last plan, or it could be from what you're creating or what you're seeing happen now. But your strategic intents for 1 year that we had, the last Middle States we had finished our strategic plan, and they became our measurable goals for Middle States.
So we're backwards then. We're doing Middle States and about to start a strategic plan?
Yeah, but your middle states, they'll ask you, and most of you who are out there, you have different accrediting agencies, but middle states is for the Northeast, and that middle states is going to ask you, how did you finish your last middle states report? You know, have you accomplished the things you were doing? They're going to want to know what your objectives to work on next will be, and then so you may have things you already know that you want to work on, but our strategic intents from the last plan became our middle states report. And I can go over that with you sometime and sit down with you. Colleen Bonner was also very instrumental in creating that. So you might want to tap her and see how that might work.
Thanks.
Yeah. It should make it easier. I'm just, middle states should be easy if you've got a good strategic plan.
Hey, Terry, it's Paul. I was wondering if you have any tips for us on how do you keep this process as lean as possible so it doesn't become a monster and take up a lot of people's time, you know, and correlated to that is how do you create a plan where people aren't worn out by the time they figure out the what? Because it's the how you get this done that becomes at least I found on different strategic plans.
Well, when the consultant came to us the last time we did work with a consultant, they said it's going to be a 1.5 year process. I said, no, we can't do that. You've got to get this done in 6 months because it will lose its momentum. It'll lose its initiative. So the core team met monthly to develop this in the first 2 months, maybe every 3 to 4 weeks. Once they created those areas of focus, then the task force began. That was I think the core team set up in October. Then the task force began in January, and they gave their reports out in May. And you need to give your task force time to meet. And so it may mean some release time for teachers. It may mean to do that. It may mean compensating some people for some work that they might do. I know when we do a middle stage, usually compensate the person who's facilitating that or coordinating that. So it's great if you have an outside facilitator that's not linked to the school that's telling you to do these things and how to move along, because people listen sometimes to people from the outside when they know they've got to get a report for that person who's then reporting to the board and the president. Right. So having somebody from the outside facilitate might be a way to get it done quicker.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? Well, I'm part of the Mesa board, and I'm very happy to be here with you today to talk about strategic planning. And I'm also offering that if you need to contact somebody, I will be sending this finished PowerPoint to Kim, who will be sending it out to all participants. And I'll make sure that my email is included in there, and be happy to have an individual conversation with you if you have questions and help you towards creating the best strategic plan you can for your school.
Well,
okay.
Just want to thank all of you for participating on today. Let me just make sure. Paul, were you reaching up to ask a question?
No, I just can't sit still.
Okay, I saw you happened to be one of the squares in my screen, and I thought, oh, maybe he was reaching up to unmute before I close it. But wanted to really thank Terry for his presentation, sharing his knowledge of strategic plan and strategic planning. And I think, as you know, as he has stated, there's so many different variations of what a plan looks like that every one of you will come out and do something unique and individual to your school. But I also appreciate Terry being willing to share his information. And for any of you, you chance, take advantage of one of the Mesa board members and have an individual conversation so that he can help you get on the path that you want to be on. and help you get moving in the direction that you would like to. Because I think the bottom line and the most important thing is get your strategic plan, have it working, because it keeps you focused as a school and moving in the critical areas and concerns that you need to address on there, and for it not to become a document that sits on a shelf and collects dust. That's not an operable strategic plan if that happens. So again, thank you to all of you and to Terry.